Robin, do you know how to get rid of the bugs? Or is that going to be audible?
We might get feedback with the speaker there.
Better.
That doesn't help.
Say something and we'll do it.
If that helps. See if I pick up my heartbeat.
I'll do a mic check.
Get my brain wide.
Go. Check, check, check.
Mic check.
Yeah, try it, John.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, testing. I can probably,
You just want to
I
project?
can just project. There you go.
All right.
There we go.
There you go. I'll project. I love it.
Oh.
Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
I had, every day is a good day that you learn something new, and finding out that the church had moved, which I probably knew somewhere, but, and it's a good thing I didn't go to the old place. And so I know how to get here now. Come back again sometime. I'm kind of a pinch hitter for tonight. My wife originally agreed to do this, and she has double and triple booked herself. She's supposed to do a radio program tomorrow, run the radio program, and she's in Milwaukee. Had to go to Milwaukee for family matters that she scheduled previously, and then she realized that since she's going to Milwaukee, she won't be able to do tonight. Jeremy sent a reminder a few days ago, and so we kind of scrambled a little bit. So I'm not an expert in anything anymore. I'm too old for that. And the topic that was suggested was alternatives, to consider alternatives to military spending. And so I came up with a title that, Why War is Worse Than Hell, an economic analysis by a non-economist. There's been a lot about economy in the last 5 or 6 years. In fact, since the Gulf, not since the Gulf War, but since the Iraq War that George Jr. started. And I actually read all of Ecclesiastes today to have a kind of a text to get going and find rooting in some kind of old wisdom. And the best I found out of there was there's nothing new under the sun. And that goes for war and military and diversion of resources from taking care of the citizens, the people that constitute a country, and acquiring more power, projecting power, getting influence over neighboring countries, and in some cases accumulating wealth for certain special constituents. We've learned some things over the years from the war. One of the things we learned about World War II, it was probably one of the few really necessary wars. And an aftermath was that there was this thing called the GI Bill that turned out to be one of the best investments the country has ever made by sending the returning soldiers to college, if they so wished, or training them in other ways. And that has paid dividends for a couple of generations. We have lost that message, and for various factors I may go into, we can't seem to get back there to spending money in a useful way like that, a productive way. From the Korean War, I would say everything I learned about that. Actually, my first memory that has anything to do with war or conflict was a newspaper front page I saw when I was maybe 6 years old, 7 years old. It was a picture of Oriental men with those tri-flap caps and Tommy guns with that circular magazine, herding 3 or 4 GIs in front of them. They were prisoners. And in an interesting way, that scared the bejeebers out of me. Really, I found that really upsetting. I didn't know what it was about, but I didn't like the look of it. But many of the lessons we've learned from the Korean War were actually in the TV series MASH. which came down pretty hard on war. And one of the conversations was between Father McCullough and Hawkeye. And Hawkeye was frustrated as usual about all the young, perfect bodies getting torn apart and people dying. And McCullough was trying to convince him it was okay because war is hell. And Hawkeye says, this is one of the logical errors that we often make, that things that are similar are the same. They aren't. Hawkeye said, war isn't hell. War is war. And hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse. McCullough says, how do you figure, Hawkeye? Father, easy. Tell me, who goes to hell? McCullough says, sinners, I believe. Hawkeye, exactly. There are no innocent bystanders in hell. War is chock full of them. Little kids, cripples, old ladies. In fact, except for some of the brass, almost everybody involved is an innocent bystander. And now we can add to the brass, who are pretty much excluded from danger and conflict. We can add quite a network of transnational, global, corporate interests who actually drive the industrial military complex. Just before Eisenhower went out of office, he had his famous comment that was publicly recorded, that every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. And this is a kind of an economic argument. You're spending your money the wrong way. 15 years later, Martin Luther King said, a nation that contributes year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And the only argument I can take with that is he said spending money on military defense, and at the time in Vietnam we weren't doing any such thing, spending money on defense. In fact, we're still not spending money on defense, I would claim. So I think even at that time he could have said something a little different about using the euphemism military defense. Everybody know who Smedley Butler was?
Yeah, we have his book.
Yeah.
And we pass his book out a lot.
War's a racket.
War is a racket.
War is a racket. And he summed up what I think of as the economic message. These are like little short bits, like in Ecclesiastes. The flag follows the dollar, and the soldier follows the flag. And he had good credentials. He was a military man. He made it safe for corporations on 5 continents. And he, along the way, got 3 Congressional Medals of Honor, and I think the 3rd one he declined to receive it. So he had pretty good credentials for making a statement like that.
Yeah, where you at?
And in a country like this, it's the richest country on the planet. It has 4.4% of the world's population. So in a sense, we're just a miserable little dot on the planet as far as population goes. But this country spends as much on military, defense, Pentagon, all that spending, almost as much as the rest of the world put together. Another similar factoid is that the United States spends as much on health care in this country as the rest of the world combined. And what we get for that is the United States ranks 17th among the 35 most developed countries in all measures of population health. and worse than 17 in many. They're last in many. So we're not getting much bang for the buck there. And I'd have to say that as far as defense is concerned, we're not getting very much bang for the buck either. And when we think about, if we really are thinking about spending this on defense and homeland security and protecting our homes and making a decent way of life for our population, we're not spending our money in a very good way. So the money we spend on military doesn't have much to do with defense. After the end of the Cold War, around 1989 or 90, military spending started to go down. This is the famous peace dividend that we were supposed to get. The money would be freed up to go elsewhere. And over the 8-year period, up until the point that George Bush Jr. was elected at the end of 2000, military spending had declined to about $300 billion a year in this country. And over the next 8 years, starting in 2000, by 2008, it had increased 41%, 45% increase. And led to worldwide military spending that went up to $1 trillion. What happened during that period to make it go up? President Bush and Vice President Cheney came into office and basically declared that this $300 billion budget surplus that they inherited was outrageous. The people that earned that, that's their money, they should have it back. So they gave massive rebates and they cut taxes, cut tax rates. And they turned around and then went to war. And for the cost of it, they had to borrow it, all of it. In over 8 years, they borrowed over $1 trillion. Cheney was asked, well, what about this debt we're having to go into? Our war supplementals of $200 billion a year, sometimes more than that per year. He said, what about it's increasing the national debt. And he says, you don't have to worry about the national debt. It's just on paper, it doesn't figure. Tell that to about half of the House of Representatives, that it doesn't matter, the deficits. And that the tax rates are too high. So the United States spending share of that $1.5 trillion was up to $711 billion in fiscal year 2008, which constituted 48% of the total world spending. And the United States spending is really distantly followed by China. And in order, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, those five alone account for almost all of it. Everyone else in the world is a totally bit player as far as military spending is concerned. And if you look at where the arms come from, who's making them and who's selling them, it's the same frickin' 5 countries. The United States is, U.S. corporations are 7 of the 11 biggest arms suppliers on the planet that we sell to other countries. And that's just what we sell. If you add what we give to other countries as military aid, and we give a lot of military aid, it's even bigger. So I've seen this a lot in Veterans for Peace circles. I'm not a veteran, by the way, well, of the Indian Health Service, which is a commissioned corps, and I actually have a battle ribbon for flying on small, non-scheduled airlines, taking patients from a reservation to a big city hospital, hundreds of miles away. So how's the war economy working for you? Well, since 2007, U.S. families' income is down by 7%. 1 in 6 families receives food aid, 1 of 4 children in the United States receives food aid. 57% of children live in poor households, that's below the poverty level, in the United States, richest country in the world. And 48% of children live in households that are dependent on welfare. That's compared to, that's 2007, and in 1983 it was 30% of children lived in households, families that were dependent on welfare. This is just upside and backwards and totally bizarre. And for that, and we know the IRS just reported last week that the income disparity continues to grow. 19% of all income in the United States goes to 1% of the population. Child poverty, the U.S. is 27th out of the 31 developed nations in the number of children in poverty. And of course, I've mentioned the other casualty of wars is the national debt, or at least of the Afghan-Iran war. We recovered pretty much from the big debt of World War II, but we have not recovered from the debt of the 8 years of the first 8 years of this millennium. And the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about is now it's more complex. It's a more complex complex. It's a super complex. Military, industrial, congressional, and media. Who owns the media? Who owns the representatives, our elected people?
Corporations.
The money, yes, the money. So, and the corporations understand that in order to make their weapons to sell, they had better be sure every congressman has a piece of every bit of action that they have. So there's the supply chains are strong enoughly embedded in every state. Manufacturing sites are in every state, so that there is tremendous pressure on congressmen to not pull back on any of that. And there are fights to the death over stupid things like the F-22 fighter that Congress said the military is going to take another 8 of them 1 year. And the military says we don't want them, we don't need them, we never wanted them. We never will want them. The Congress said, no, you're going to have them. And the threat is that I don't know, make some Grumman, I guess, said, well, we're just going to have to close down this $25 billion plant. 25,000 people are going to be out of work. You want that? Well, we don't, but we don't want them working doing that. So what's the consequence of spending all this money? Well, we've mentioned some of them: child poverty, poor health. In fact, we don't seem capable in our country of managing the health care issue either. Is that we know by all of our developed country colleagues out there, you can get a whole lot better for a whole lot less. Well, these are opportunity costs, they're called. That's another economics term. And that when you divert your resources over there, you actually can't spend them on some things here, and when you can't spend them over here, there are going to be consequences. There's opportunity, you lost an opportunity. Instead of wasting the money there, you didn't spend it for useful purpose over here. And one of the areas is employment, and I'll talk quite a bit more about that. Education. We have forgotten the lesson about the GI Bill 60 years ago. Housing falls apart, can't be financed, can't be rebuilt. Public health goes down the tank, along with medical care. And we're understanding now that our national infrastructure, the roads, the electric grid, railroads, public transportation, is also going down the toilet because it hasn't been maintained for a long time. A huge interstate bridge in Minneapolis collapsed 4 or 5 years ago. Actually, it was a week after I went over it. and something that the internet system, interstate system, the highway system in Minneapolis is impressive. I mean, you got to drive 50 miles to go from anywhere to anywhere up there, and it's a lot of traffic, and it crosses the Mississippi River a couple times, and those have to be with that kind of traffic, that kind of stuff has to be maintained. It isn't getting that way. It isn't being maintained. So our infrastructure is sadly overlooked. So 2005, the Institute for Policy Studies, Robert Pollin and Heidi Garrett-Peltier wrote a report on the employment effects, the opportunity costs in employment in this country. What's the consequence of spending, what's the bang for the buck for spending $1 on military, on defense, compared to spending $1 on a variety of other things? So if you just, rather than spend it on the military, if you just give it as a tax rebate, give it back to the taxpayer, it'll result in 26% more jobs than the job stimulus it is giving that dollar to in the military spending. If you put the money into healthcare, $1 spent on that rather than military will make 50% more jobs than it would if you spend it in the military. If you spend it on education, teachers, universities, supporting university research, 107% more jobs. It's over twice as many jobs would be created than if you spent the same dollar on military. Mass transit, 131%. You spend $1 on the military, you get $1 worth of jobs, but if you spend it on transportation, to mass transit, you get $2.31 worth of employment. And if you spend $1 on construction things that have to do with home weatherization and improvement of the infrastructure, it creates 50% more jobs than if the money goes on the military. The average military worker in the military complex salary is about $66,000, was in 2005 about $66,000, and the value of the jobs that are being created otherwise range from a low of $44,000 to a high of $74,000. And I haven't calculated an average or what it would be, but it's about the same value jobs, quality jobs. And of course, the GI Bill told us how the education pays back year after year, generation after generation. I'm benefiting. My father has died. He was in World War II. He was a bombardier. He came back in one piece, went back to college, got his degree on the GI Bill, and it got him a start in life that made life so much better for my sister and me. And I'm still benefiting from that. And, you know, some of the money I inherited from him is going to get passed on to my children and grandchildren. It just keeps paying back. So, this handout's just 2 pages, and I have 3 resources at the bottom. One is that report to the employment effects of spending $1 on anything other than military. If you're not familiar with it, you probably all heard of the National Priorities Project as an alternative to military spending in all the various ways. It's a vast website. But I found the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, has got an immense amount of hard data on worldwide military spending and on the armaments industry.